I remember growing up with my stepfather. He's an Italian guy, and he talked about the degeneration of the family. How the family used to be based on like values and principles and more or less tradition. Where today, people getting divorced, and that's not, if it's not working, then it's not working. And I believe in that. But even the concept, right, is because there's something inherently, people are not being developed with deeper sense of life, a connectiveness within themselves, and as resultingly a connectiveness with people.
Yeah, my father was here Christmas Day, and that was part of what he was talking about. He was remembering when he was watching my son open all of his gifts and being all excited. He was remembering how he never got any of that. So that was the first thing he was thinking about. But he was thinking about life in Italy, where he had nothing, but he was happy. And then he just kind of looked down and he's like, and then Canada, and then, because I mean, I think for him, his driving purpose since he moved to this country was to become Canadian. Like, he got a paper route when he was a kid, and the first thing he bought with his money was a desk to do homework at, because he thought that's what Canadian kids do. He desperately wanted skates. He desperately wanted this. He worked very hard for that. At this point in their lives, they're extremely comfortable, him and my mother, and they're not happy. So they're in Spain right now. you know, but yeah, like I think like in terms of the connectedness, my parents, I saw their life here as being extremely disconnected. If I wanted connection, I would look to my grandparents who moved here later in their lives. And I just, like, my grandfather maybe wasn't the nicest of men, but my memories of him are chain smoking in the tomato patch. He had this thing about growing giant tomatoes and then like 12 feet long zucchinis, just because, and he'd enter them in contests. And then, he'd beat you if you went too close to his fig tree and stuff. So there was that from him that always stayed with me. And then on my mother's side, her mother, she always had her little garden in the Jane and Finch area in Toronto. And I remember sitting with her, and she would tie lavender together. And I was always a bit of a dirt pig as a kid too, but that wasn't acceptable because I was supposed to be like, clean and proper and like shiny and something to show off, tell your friends like proudly. I failed at that, but I never really had any concept of who I was or what I was doing. I did read To Kill a Mockingbird. I really loved the book, and I always had this urge to, help people. So after reading that book, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. So I ran away from home to attend law school at Dalhousie in Halifax. And I studied there for a while, and I was going crazy. Like, I was taking these courses and having better understandings of our justice system here in Canada and how things were the way that they are. And the more I understood, the angrier I got. And the angrier I got, the crazier I got. So I would do my work, and then I'd stay up nights drawing, and that was how I got my kicks out. And
even in law, like as someone who has friends that are lawyers, it's a whole different world. We hire a lawyer not because, well, first of all, because we don't know our rights, because they've been written. We are born into the society, and we're not educated. Maybe this should be something.
But they're written in such a way that they're not accessible to everyone on purpose. So this way, the lawyer is absolutely essential and not a luxury. You can't, these people spend their lifetimes studying this.
It's like another language. Mm-hmm. It would be like Hebrew too. Right? That
just drier. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we see it's a certain person, a certain type of temperament that can kind of muscle through law school and become successful at that. And so you see, especially with this show, is I think we strive to be a platform where this kind of conversation takes place. On two levels: current events, what's going on right now, but then talking about and starting to actually get live witnesses, live accounts to how someone's best efforts to find a path in this society usually was ended up them having to blaze their own trail, and that how can community, how can society, how can this government become more responsive, adaptive, appropriate, and relevant to the people in which it's serving, because that's essentially what government does, it's to serve. And we elect people in who we believe are going to serve what needs to be done.
Our interests.
Right. Well, our needs as people, but not only that, but also allowing, and we see two things, is first of all, how creativity and art is such an aspect of culture. I know there's a little bit of experience from, say, in Toronto, is they tried to get the art community, but it just wouldn't take off. Toronto invested a lot of money to make the art community take off, but it just wouldn't. And it's a bit of a thorn in the side. You go to Toronto, it's a little gray, ain't it? You look at Stafania's house. It's very nice and beautiful. Look how colorful everything is, right?
It's not polished though, and it's rough and it's ragged, and that's, I think, like I lived in Toronto for quite a while, and I never felt very comfortable in the art scene there, showing things, because this idea of perfect and framing and it was not.
So, and even so we see then too is doubly, not only we see is then even in the arts community itself, how it's become a business, and how there's certain people that think that they're going to go and become successful artists, but get literally washed between the cracks, while the people who are producing what is considered modern art or abstract art or mainstream art, and we see then is so, and this is something that, now the second point there is that we talk about this in the show, about the concept, the ideological focal point, that our government, and that usually in North America, we're based on a system of predictability and fear. We don't know how things are going to go, so we think we have to create guidelines based on fear so that we can ensure predictability, that things are going to work out. What we see is that in fact, there's an inherent goodness in life, and if we foster that from the start through education, which we talked about on the first show, amending curriculum and education style from more standardization to individualization, that we can actually also foster people who have more of an arts temperament, but also bring that and allow that to flourish and see what that does for our culture. Because it's the same artsy way of thinking that we get our adaptability that businesses so require.
Or steal. And I just, the thing about the artistic temperament is that for me, it's about openness. There's a little bit of magic inherent in it. It's about problem solving. It's about, am I allowed to curse?
Do what you gotta do.
It's about basically turning shit into gold. You can't always change everything about your environment, but you can always make it more hospitable. You can make it less of a great place. You can't always say, well, I'm not happy here, so I'm going to move. So what do? Right. You transform it. And I just, to me, art is also not something that is a business. It's not something that's exclusive. I would never identify myself as an artist with a capital A. I've never attended art school. I've never taken an art class. Everything I've done is self-taught. So to me, what art is something that everyone is capable of. It's in everything that you do, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's a craft. It's anything or any trade that is studied, learned, anything that you feel the slightest bit of passion about. So within Toronto too, I think, we have a bit of a, what's the word, an inferiority complex. We're always looking up to New York and seeing what's going on there. And as a result of that, looking outward and looking at them and wanting to be like that, I think that's a part of the reason why the art community in Toronto isn't burgeoning, because tying back in, you're not feeling yourself. You're not taking that space to know what's inside you, to react to your own environment and then create from that place. You're always looking around and trying to emulate.
And I think this is so important. And what I was talking about with that first point about fostering the inherent goodness that's in everyone is that actually there's an inherent creativity that one is not. And we see that when there isn't guidelines in this respect, when we're talking about the inherent goodness in someone's vocation, when the right circumstances created, where say an arts person has access to an art studio and different machines and different things and all their supplies, they can do wonderful things. But if a company hired them and said, you need to do this, but you can't do this, this, and this, and this, I'm sure they could come up with something, but it's still not the same thing. It would never speak as loud as something that just comes in of itself inherently.
Like I used to have this drive, like to save things, to save people, to save myself through other people, and I had no idea how to go about doing this because there's no manual. And let's be honest, our society in particular isn't particularly well versed in these matters. There's not a lot of guidance. There's charities that you can donate money to for people that you've never met, but with terms of like really looking around your community and filling needs, filling holes, there's not a whole lot of instruction. So I came like around and around, and I always did my thing, so I had to pay my bills, so I paid my bills, but I worked with not-for-profits for a really long time. I worked, like, I would just take kids in, I would take people in. My house was like constantly people coming and going, you know, no matter how little I had, there's always food, and I just really burnt out. And it's funny, like, how I came to realize that actually taking care of myself is not a bad thing, where I used to think maybe it was, like it was selfish in my head, and understanding that taking care of myself, my needs, making sure I have outlets, making sure that I'm healthy, making sure that I am able to function within a group, these were really important steps toward helping other people.
Right, and one thing I think is very important to talk about is your like emotional metabolism and your intellectual metabolism. Now, very often, most people, especially in North America, we live our lives with lots of things that we haven't processed yet. Stress about how we feel about our partner, about our situation with our kids, and that stress, about our parents or our partner's parents, or our job or our partner's job, and our relationships at work, or not being able to go back to work. We have all these things that we don't realize. We don't know what we don't know, but it's been my experience as someone that's made it his almost vocation life, much as what Stafania just exactly said, is that by dealing with these things first, it's unimaginable. For me, I believed in it, and I've seen how other faculties of my mind have opened up because I stopped letting these kind of lowlier energies becoming the baseline, the baseline for my life.
I think also though it's a bit of it's hard work to actually just feel your feelings and deal with them as they come up, and it's not necessarily going to be comfortable for the people who know you and or around you, and it's also time consuming. Like it's not just like, yeah, you're bad because you haven't taken the time to deal with your crap. It's, you work a 9 to 5, there's people relying on you, there's people that are expecting you to perform like a machine, and that's your job. And so within a context like that, to take the time and to really what's happening, yeah, it's a bit of a luxury, unfortunately. And I think that within my own experience, like art really allows you to live in yourself more than, say, Wall Street type careers or law. But it's still like, like I deal with, okay, so I can't afford vacations and I might not own a car, but on other levels I feel like I'm richer, and I have a lot of friends who are financially more well off than I am, who are always saying to me, oh, I wish I could, what a nice life you have. They're not there when the bills are due, but I can see where, like I kind of eye their stability some days. I'm like, yeah, that's not so bad. And they kind of look at the freedom that I've afforded myself, and they're like, the way that looks too.
And I think that's what we say then is like, happiness is priceless in life, and happiness isn't money, and it's not job security, and it's not, a good house, 2 cars, the family, the the almost
acquisition, nonstop acquisition. I desire, I want, I get. And now that I got this, there's something else that I'm missing, and I'm looking over there, and this guy's got that, and now I need it too. You know. And I think that with work, to take it back to work though, work is one of my ways of worshiping. Like I definitely, when I'm using my hands and I'm using my head, and even within tattooing, like I'm still serving people. Like I am definitely even when I'm just drawing a design for somebody, I'm looking at them as a whole person. I'm considering them. I'm thinking about their past, their present, their future, the things they've told me, what they ultimately want. When I'm actually in a session and I'm tattooing a person, like I'm dealing with their illness, whatever issues they have often come up, and I listen and I'm an ear and I'm aware of a lot of different things. But it's still, like in terms of my own journey, working with the earth and being still and having my face in the sun and my hands in the ground and watching things grow, and then also just taking a step back and seeing how unimportant I am in terms of like so much of the fascinating thing about growing things to me is so much of it is about watching. It's not about doing and it's not about forcing. So much of it is just being still and looking around, like where the sun shines, how the wind blows, where the water falls, because we're just not that smart. Like we're smart in a way that may be very stupid, I think, sometimes, but we don't quite have the intelligence that nature does. That intuitive, the dog can't call itself a dog, but the dog has instincts and the dog follows those instincts and they rarely steer that dog wrong. A dog knows how to go outside and eat an herb to heal itself, and it knows when not to eat, when allowed to not eat, like these are just things that they know. And I think that that's part of what I've been finding so fascinating about working with animals and plants within the farming context. It's something that nothing else has been able to give me in terms of satisfaction or knowledge.
Right, and I think this is exactly what we're seeing too. Is the two things. People complain that their kids don't go outside and play anymore, or but they also see. But are you not supporting a society which is inherently causing that, right? And like we see then what can we do about that, right? And we see is that actually, and I just had a bit of a thought, maybe Stafania, developing a program. Like one thing I talk about that I want to do as well is the tiny house movement, getting property in Caledon where people can come and build a condo quality, tiny house for $15,000. Why do we need a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 house? Moreover, but then we build them in micro communities of 60 to 100 people, where we do the sustainable gardening, Waldorf school, Montessori type schooling, and we get this experience, right? Is that we see is that it's not, but all we know how to do is complain about it. And I see in my own experience, I think, and the gift of spiritual progress, spiritual growth, is you get a higher level of vision. You see the bigger picture. And as you continue to grow, you see it even bigger, right?
Yeah, I just with the kids though, like it's you can't be upset with the kids for, like the example that you lead. Like with my own child, like I definitely make sure that he's with me. Like I try not to divide my life up too much into chunks. So if I'm outside, he's outside. I don't send him away so I can go and do my work.
Which is huge. We see that is that our life is different for them. There's a philosopher by the name of Alan Watts. He was from 1915 to 1973 when he passed. And he was he was instrumental in bridging Western philosophy with Eastern mysticism. And one thing he talked about is how we treat children. When instead of treating them like a human being that's coming into this world, and it's our duty to help them in their growth and their progress, we treat them as if we're in charge. And by we take that approach, we see that it's groundless in ideology because they have an inherent wisdom. They know what they need. So sometimes when we say, and we divide that, and for people that there's many different types of people in society. I've been blessed on a spiritual path that I've met people that are growing spiritually, and they say that their kids are actually their biggest teachers. And I mean on a very profound level, where it's like your own mirror. And you see that very often is that things will happen of their self. Of course, and we've talked about, Stafania have talked about it on another date, where, yeah, there's still a degree of, steering the ship, but it's all well intentioned as well, right? And yeah.
It's well intentioned, but even like, okay, so I'm certainly not right all of the time. I do what I consider to be right. I'm not particularly dogmatic, but like, I tell my kid on a regular basis, like, I'm setting rules. I'm using these rules to help you. Whether or not you decide to agree with those rules, follow those rules, or, you're still learning, right? And even for me, like, I just every day I'm like, wow, I'm not really that with it, Like, I used to think I was so smart, and then I had a baby, Yeah, so that's always very humbling, but good to remember,
Right, and I see, for me, I see it as part and parcel, right? But I think, and you see, especially what Stefani says, you can even grow from that, where it's a basis of humility. I think it's understand people lack. I think it's one thing to even lack humility as a parent, but I think the scariest thing and the most upsetting thing is when a parent lacks the open-mindedness.
Or just anybody lacks the open-mindedness.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a whole thing.
There's an energy, much as like people have an energy, and like say someone who goes to church, they like the energy of their reverend. Same thing with an herb, or like your animal. If you have a dog or a cat, you like the energy of it. Like Stefania is saying, is that there's an energy, but just having it around you, a healing, an indirect healing.
Like the imposition of will, and Canada, I think, is an extremely paternal government. Like, we have very paternal government. Like, there's a crazy amount of rules around everything.
We got to talk about these things, right? We got to have that platform to talk about these things, and where the change happens.
I had parents that were really eager for us to fit in through any means possible, and I just, like, so I guess what I'm saying is I felt a certain lack of culture and authenticity in my own family, because they were not being true to themselves, like who they were and where they came from, which was poverty and, Italy. That was supposed to go over here, and we had to conform to a different ideal if we wanted to go over there, and so never felt part of here. When I first got to Guatemala on a trip, I got there and I really fell in love. And I think the thing that I fell in love with was the people had such a sense of place and purpose. Like, they're as much a part of their environment as the volcanoes and the rocks and the lake and the trees that grew there. Like, everyone had a place and everyone was fairly healthy. I mean, it was a dangerous place and I saw some things, but I didn't see homelessness, and I didn't see old folks' homes. I saw families living together, working together. Like, maybe now the grandparents get a bit older, so they would do the meals, and they would watch the kids, the grandkids, and then the kids will go out to work. And everybody, the kids didn't get extended childhoods up to 30, 35. Like, they had some fun. Like, if you look up in the sky any day at 3 when the wind blows in, like, fathers and sons are out there with kites that they made out of paper, flying them 200 feet up in the air. Like, they had time to enjoy life. They worked hard. They didn't have fancy clothes, but they looked great. Like, they're very beautiful people, And so I saw all of that, and I think it just made me feel such a whole in terms, like, I didn't have that here, and I think I just really wanted a piece of that. I don't think that that's how you go about that. But I wanted what they had,
right?
And they're third world, and they're not, like, generally when you raise the subject of Guatemala, people are like, why would you go there? And yet there, I just saw something that I'd never seen here, and it was beautiful.
Right, and so I know I want to really sum up everything that's being said, and I want to almost put a challenge out to the viewers. And we see that, how much of us really love something about cultures. We think, oh, Cuba, or oh, Spain, or oh, Italy, or oh, England, the quaintness. How about I challenge, because we've talked a lot, and I'm really big about being pragmatic. Okay, so what can we do about it? I challenge each viewer to try in their own life to foster that here in their own circle of influence, to allow what can happen here. Because the funny thing is, we have all those cultures here now. So how about not in all areas, but how about we try lightening up a little bit in some other areas of our lives and seeing what maybe naturally unfolds once we stop the kind of trying to impose our will.
Yeah. Allowing your environment to shape you. I used to hate winter, but there's something about this dying time where you have to go inside and you can get that interior work done, where once the snow melts and then you're out again, and that's, you're out. But just, respecting something more than your desires and what you want out of the life, whether it's because somebody told you or it's like, television is a powerful tool for making you want things, and radio and all the rest of it, but really just submitting to the time and the place and the people around you. And rather than seeking to change them or looking at other people like in terms of, okay, how do I help them? Just let them be. Give them room to be and have faith that, okay, maybe they're, in a place that you're not comfortable with or you don't agree with or that you just really don't understand. That's okay. It doesn't mean they're wrong in what they're doing. It just means you don't get it, and let it go and just focus more on taking care of yourself. Because I just find, for me, when I get caught in that trap of looking too much at what other people are doing and how much I disapprove of it, well, in those moments there's a major blind spot, and that's yourself and the movements that you yourself are making and the time that you're wasting on things you can't change anyway.
Stafania Ruffolo,
not by birth.
mother of one, very healthy, happy mother of one, local Orangeville artist, entrepreneur, herbalist,
master of everything.
Master of everything. Herb specialist, very, very meticulous tattoo artist, amongst other things. Thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you.